In today's episode, I'm going to show you how to whip up some Christmas stockings in no time. And the way you can get this patchwork look done really quickly is by grabbing a 5-inch stacker. There are 42 5-inch squares in this pack, so you could actually make 4 stockings using 1 pack of stackers and 2 yards of a solid fabric. So let's get sewing for Christmas. Here's what we need. Grab a stacker of 5-inch fabrics. I'm going to be using Holiday Cheer by My Mind's Eye from Riley Blake. It has 42 different fabrics, and it's going to give us a great variety to make a really cute patchwork front for this stocking. Then we're going to need rotary cutter, mat and ruler, fabric scissors, this free stocking template that you can download. Look for the link below the video, and 2/3 of a yard of solid fabric. This is going to make it faster if you just pick one color that you're going to use for the back and the lining. So let's get started. I have my 1/3 of a yard of the red fabric that I'm going to use for the back and the lining, and we need to cut out 3 stocking templates. Using a solid fabric versus a print makes this so much easier because you don't have to worry about which direction the stocking is going. If you're going to be making more than one stocking, you don't have to do this next step. I'm going to put my template down, and then I am going to cut my fabric. Because 2/3 of a yard can make 4, we can cut out 4 pieces. But since we only need 3, I don't want to cut out 4 and then have an extra sock-shaped piece of red fabric. So I'm going to take the second half and I'm just going to cut it in half. Then this piece is going to be extra for your next project. I'm going to put this down. I'm going to layer. So now we are going to be cutting 3 stockings at the same time. The next thing we need to do is grab some pins, pin this onto the fabric, and then cut around with your scissors, rotary cutter, or a combination of the two. We're going to set our 3 red stocking shapes aside, and we are going to start to play with our stackers. Making your stocking with the blocks 5 inches, just like they come in the pre-cut pack, we only need 10 per stocking, so you could make 4 stockings with 1 pre-cut bundle. So it looks like we have 2 of each print to choose from. Just kind of going through here, seeing what we have. So I'm just laying these squares out right on top of the template so that I know how many I need to sew together. Overlap them a little bit so you're allowing for your seam allowances, just to get a feel for what this is going to look like. Now we have these 2 sections down here that are pretty small. So to make this work with 10 squares and be able to fit and cut and catch all of these little curves, we're going to take this square and cut it into 3 pieces. So you're going to piece it here, here, and here. So now that I have this all laid out, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my phone and I'm going to take a picture of how I have those blocks organized. You don't have to do that step, but I find when you're laying out block, it just makes it easier and quicker to have something for reference. I'm going to put them right sides together, and then I'm just going to put a pin on the side that we're going to sew. One thing I love about pre-cuts is that you can get a wide variety of fabrics that are going to coordinate really quickly without having to buy a lot of yardage. I'm going to fold that one back. I just want to make sure I put it on the right side, like the top or bottom of this other block. So you'll see how I did that. We're going to sew this seam, and then this one's going to go down there, but I folded it back so that we don't catch it in that seam and need our seam ripper. I'm going to do the same thing on this row. If I'm doing a long row, like for a quilt, I don't do this, but because this is only 2 or 3 things together, I do this so I can just sew that, take that pin out, sew that. So let's head to the sewing machine. I'm using a shorter stitch length just so it stays together really nicely. And because we are going to be cutting some of these seams, so I'm using a 2.0 stitch length. Now I have these sewn together, each row sewn together and pressed. The seams pressed. I'll talk about that in a second. Now I'm going to look at my photo reference and just make sure I have this laid out the way I planned it, which I do. Now we are going to put these 2 rows together and these 2 rows together. Then we'll come back and we'll sew this half to this half. So let's move our template. I just want to show you something about how I press the seams, a little tip. So these are going like this. I pressed this seam, both of them this direction, and this seam, both of them this direction. When I pin them together, these seams are going this way, these are going this way. So you're not going to have a huge bulky mess right here where that seam meets. So you want to pay attention as you're pressing to make sure you're doing these seams opposite. It'll give your project a better finished look. It'll be a little bit easier to sew over that. And I did the same thing with these. So this one's going this way, this one's going this way. Like these, this top row, I press them both out towards the sides, and the bottom row, I press them both in towards the center. And when you're pinning these together, you want to make sure you're matching that seam line so that your patchwork looks nice and lined up and cute. Now you have two options. We can cut this to the template and just leave it like this, and it's going to be quick. Or if you want to take a little bit longer, you can put this on top of batting. And I would just use, regular quilt batting scrap, and you can quilt this together. So it'll have a little bit more dimension and everything like that. But I promised you quick and easy. So we are just going to cut this out, and we're going to use it as is without extra quilting. Now, if you feel pretty confident with the rotary cutter, you can just freehand this instead of using fabric scissors. Just make sure you're holding your template down and go slowly. It's definitely a great skill to have. You might want to just try it with scrap fabric, draw some curves, and just practice cutting. Our next step is to sew the front and back together and the two pieces of the lining together, and we're going to do that at this top edge. So again, because I picked red that really doesn't have a right or wrong side, I'm just going to put these one on top of each other, and I'm going to pin along the top, and then do the same thing for the linings. We're going to have these together, and we're going to pin and sew across the top. Now we've sewn these together, and we've pressed open the seams, and voila, the lining now has a wrong side because of the pressed open seam and a right side. So what we're going to do is we're going to put these right side together, lining up these seams and making sure the feet are all going in the same direction. I do like to line it up, especially if you have some patchwork going on, with the more detailed side on the top so that you can make sure your seams stay the direction that they're pressed in as you sew. We're going to pin all the way around, and then I want to show you my little pin trick. You're going to need to leave a few inches open in the lining side. Turn this. So what I do is I use different pins. I'm going to use these black ones just as a visual reminder of, hey, it's time to stop. So I'm going to start here, I'm going to stop here, and I'm going to use these cute Riley Blake pins everywhere else. Because sometimes you just get on a roll and you don't realize you're so close to where you began until you've gotten there. We're going to sew around this with a 1/4 inch seam, and again, leaving the opening for turning. And because we're going to be sewing on quite a few curves to make this sock shape, we are going to use a pretty short stitch length again. So I'm going to be using a 2.0 stitch length. You're just going to get a better curve when you turn and press it if you have smaller stitches rather than large ones. The next step is to clip the curves, which you can do in a more traditional manner with little scissors. And you can either just clip lots of little clips, or you can do triangles. Basically, what we need to do is we need to relieve the pressure outside of the stitching line so that when we turn and press it, you get a nice curve. But let me show you my favorite way of doing curves. Pinking shears. They're not your least expensive scissors, but I'm telling you, they are worth every penny. They are going to create all of those triangles. You just need to go pretty slow. Make sure you don't hit your stitching, and you're going to cut along all of your curves. This is a huge, huge time saver and much, much easier on your hands. Two, you don't have to do it along the straight edges, just on the bottoms of each side where everything is curving. Now we're going to turn this right side out through the opening that we left in the lining. Make sure you get these curves pushed out. It's a good idea to have an opening big enough that you can either fit your hand or at least your fingers through, so you can use your hands to go down and kind of rub along the seams and help get this open before you take it to the ironing board and press. Okay, now we're going to take this to the ironing board and press that nice and flat. I always start my top stitching on the back of the stocking and pull up your bobbin thread so you don't get a big weird knot back there. And then just sew around at whatever distance you decide you want to. You could do a 1/4 inch, you could do an inch, you could do a decorative stitch, whatever you decide. I've also changed my thread to red so that it matches most of the front and the back. And as you get to the seams, try and flatten that out as much as possible so that you don't get a big lump on both of the sides. So if you're going to make some stockings, I would love to know for who and why. Do you make new stockings every year to change with the theme of your decor? Do you make them kind of as gift bags? Do you just add new ones as new people come into your family? Let me know in the comments. I pressed along the top and sewed that hem. Now we need to make a little hanger. And guess where I'm going to find that fabric from? Right here. We're going to use the extra piece that came off the toe to make our hanger. So I'm going to line that up on the grid, and I'm going to cut that as wide as I can. So that means 2¼ inches. Let's see, we're going to cut this to 6½ inches. So 2½ by 6½ is the size fabric that we are going to use for our loop. We're going to take our loop fabric, turn it right side down. We're going to press each of the short sides 1/4 inch. Now we're going to fold it in half lengthwise and press. And this is the perfect little project for my quilter's clapper, which is a piece of wood, really easy to hold. Right when I take the iron off, I'm going to press down. Some of the heat from the fabric is going to come into the wood, and it's going to make it stay folded a little bit better. Now we are going to fold each of these raw edges in to that fold we just made. I'm just going to kind of finger press. I'm going to try and do this all in one fell swoop because it's not a long piece, so it's manageable. If it was longer, I would press each of these sides first, but I'm going to do that. Yes, it's going to work. Now we're going to press that. And now we're going to sew right down there to hold that closed. Now we have our stocking and our loop and our optional button. So we're going to fold the loop in half, and I like to keep the stitch side towards the outside of my stocking. We're going to take the outside, the top seam that is away from the toe, so at the heel of the foot. We're going to put it about 1 inch down. We're going to pin that in place, and we're going to sew that on. Putting it in at the end and putting it even over that seam makes it hang the way I like it the best, so that you're seeing the loop when you're looking at your stocking straight on. So you need 2½ yards, and I'm just going to square the end. And then you're going to need, so you're going to need 8 panels altogether. So you're going to cut 4 because you're going to get 1 out of each side of this fabric, 44-inch wide. I'm going to cut 4 at 21 inches. And then I like to press it again and make sure the size is perfect at the end when I'm cutting off something off such a long piece. So we're going to get 4 of these pieces, and then we are going to create the shape. Okay, so I'm going to show you what we're shooting for. We're shooting for 8 triangles like this, 20 inches on the bottom, 3 inches on the top, and cut on the angle. And again, when you keep it folded like it comes with the fabric, if it's directional, everybody will stay looking the correct direction, because the last thing we want is for them to be like this, where all their heads are coming at us and they look like they're, I don't know, partying at the tree. So I'm going to show you how I achieved that. So we take the pieces that we cut a little bit oversized, and I pressed them, and I pressed the fold actually, so it stays nice and flat. And the first thing I'm going to do is square this up. So it needs to be, and always double check, I double check 15 times, 20 inches across, 20½ up. So it's a very subtle difference, and I guess you just need to be consistent. So if you do 20 by 20, do it that way all the way around, because if you have 3 that are 20 by 20½ and 3 that are 20 by 20, you're going to get very confused when you're sewing. So I'm going to line this up on the bottom, and we're going to be able to trim all the edges just a teeny bit to make sure that we get 8 pieces that are the same. So first, I just cut off the folded edge. And now I'm going to measure 20 across just to be triple check. Yep, 5 to 25. That's 20. My math teacher would be so proud. Always making sure it stays lined up. So I'm just going to trim that. Okay. Get rid of the selvage. So now we have it correct this way. Now we're going to turn it. Line these edges up again along the guidelines. Keep everything straight and square. And now we need 20 and a half. So first I'm going to square off the bottom. So 20 is going to be 24, add a ½ inch. We're going to cut the top at 24 and a half. And those numbers just depend wherever you land on your grids for squaring them up. Okay, get rid of that. Now, this is going to be the 20-inch edge by their feet, or the bottom of whatever your directional fabric is. Then we need to center, have 3 inches at the top. So you're going to measure in 8.5 inches from each side. And I'm just using a fabric marker to put a little mark there. 8.5. And then just to double check that you got your width right, you can make sure that it's 3 inches between those two marks, which it is. Now, you're just going to cut between that mark up there and this bottom corner. Now you have some fun triangles to find things to do with. So cut the one, and then cut the other. So that gives us 2 more. So you're going to do that until you have 8 of these. Now that we have 8 of these cut, we are going to put them right sides together. And so it's just right sides together, and we're going to sew them all together to make a circle. Just do not sew the last one, and we're going to sew with a ½ inch seam. I'm just going to pin that and take it to the sewing machine. And I usually pin 4 sets together, so then I, can just sew quickly and then start putting them together instead of going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I can count 8. All right, so we'll go stitch those. So now I'm at my sewing machine. I'm going to sew the 4 sets of 2 together with a ½ inch seam allowance. I sometimes just like to add a piece of washi tape to give me a longer guide so I can just move pretty quick and get that done. So we're going to get that done next. So now that you've sewn together 7 of the 8 sides of your 8 panels for your tree skirt, we're going to turn it over and press the seams open and flat. Now you need to decide how you want to do the backing. I have decided that I'm going to be using the same process with a random toss, so I don't have to worry about which edge is the bottom, which is the top, but I'm going to make the 8 more things because I want my tree skirt to be reversible. If you just want a plain color on the back or don't care if it's going to be reversible, you can get a 54-inch wide piece of fabric, and then you can just iron that and use the topper that you just made as the pattern for how to cut that. But I'm going to make it a little more difficult because I want it to be more versatile. I want to have a fun gnome side, and then I want to have a more traditional snowflake on red. And this is one of the flannel prints from my Gnome for Christmas fabric collection from Riley Blake Designs as well. So I've cut out these 8, and now I'm going to do the same process. I'm going to stitch these together, 7 of the 8 sides, open them, and iron those flat. So we'll do that, and then we'll go on to the next step. So to get set up for the gnome side of my tree skirt, because I'm going to make my tree skirt 2-sided, so I have options each year, I'm taking the panel from my Gnomes for Christmas fabric from Riley Blake Designs and cutting it apart. So this is the big one in the center. I'm going to cut this guy out, and I'm going to place him on my tree skirt, what will be center front. It comes patchwork to be a quilt, but we're just going to cut it out so we can get at all these cute little gnomes and their sayings. And I want to keep, for this one, I want to keep Gnome for Christmas, but all roads lead isn't going to fit really well. So I'm going to cut like this and then go up around that gnome, because I also don't want to cover all of this fabric. Then I was debating, it's hard when you're the designer, you get attached to the words. I was like, well, it'd be really cute if it had all the little sayings around. But then I decided I'm probably just going to do it like this, where I have each of the big gnomes in a section. So it's a little more subtle, but it gives it a little bit more variety in size. So this is where I used the thermal web. So I'm going to take the backing off. I'm just going to iron this on. So now I have 8 big gnomes, and I have 8 sections, but remember, some of them are going to be behind your tree. So I'm going to make sure that I put this big one and the Gnome for Christmas words, they're the only words I'm going to keep, in the center front. My space isn't super huge, but it's directly across from the unstitched edges, like the part that we didn't sew together yet. And then I will just decide which gnomes go where. Okay, the next step is to get this Heat and Bond lightweighted adhesive onto the back of our gnomes, so that it's going to be really easy to press them onto the Christmas tree skirt and just do a really quick loose stitch around it. Alternately, you can use a spray-on adhesive if you prefer that. I just don't have very good ventilation in here, so I'm going to go with this. So I have the Heat and Bond light paper. I have my iron set to satin per their instructions. I'm using a wool pressing mat that Riley Blake Designs gave me. That's who I designed fabric for. So one thing to be careful of, we're gonna iron it on the back, right? But it's really hard to see where that gnome is when we put the paper over top of the back. So the way I do this is I keep her right side up, and then see how well you can see that. So then you're just going to want to make like a rectangle, because if you do the actual outline, it's not going to be correct when you flip the fabric and haven't flipped this the same way. So I'm just going to take a pen, and I want to make sure I do a bigger piece than I'm going to want to have cut out, because I want my Heat and Bond all the way to the edges of the fabric. So now I'm going to just use some paper scissors, since it's pretty much paper that I'm cutting. Cut that piece out. And it doesn't matter, we can cut that other part off when we do it with the fabric. Now we're going to flip her over, and paper side up, adhesive side down. Just make sure she gets covered. I can see that she is. You might not be able to. Now we're going to run the iron over that 1 to 2 seconds gently. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, gently, gently, gently. Okay. So now testing it. Yep, that's adhered. Now I'm going to take my fabric scissors, and I'm just going to cut loosely around the gnome. And I'm not going to cut, I'm going to make sure I leave a little bit of cream all the way around, because I'm going to just do a really loose stitch to put this on. I'm not going to do a full applique stitch because I just don't want this to take quite that long. And I feel like if the edge ends up fraying a little bit, it kind of goes with the whole gnome theme. It'll be fine. But you, of course, can make whatever choices you're going to make for your Christmas skirt and whatever fabric you're using if you're not using my gnomes. So now this one's trash, that part's trash, and we have her ready to apply. So we're gonna repeat and get all 8 of our gnomes ready like that. Now I'm gonna place my gnomes. I have them all with the adhesive on the back, or the fusible interfacing on the back, and I'm going to place them into each of the 8 panels. And I'm going to use, I don't know if you can see this really well, this little Cute Cuts ruler by Lori Holt. Riley Blake makes them. I'm going to do a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and so that's basically right above that pink, and then about an inch. We'll have it about an inch above where this is going to be, so it's going to place really nicely. So I'm just going to peel the paper off the back. And then I'm going to gently put that down. Oh, frayed the edge there, not good. But I did say I didn't care, right? It would look cute. So we just got to punt and go for it. So it's about 3.5 from that edge, 3.25. So I'm going to move him over a teeny bit. And you can decide, you know, exactly how perfectionist you want to get on this. I'm trying to let go of my perfectionist tendencies with some of these things. And then I'm just going to press again about 1 to 2 seconds on the silk setting. Just whatever you use to put this on here, just follow the manufacturer's instructions. Okay, then I did decide what order I wanted to have them. So I'm just going to pivot my tree skirt, get to the next one, and I'm going to do the light guy next. So I want them to be all about the same amount from the edge for consistency. Now I'm just going to use my free motion stitching and just stitch all the way around the edge, and it is going to do a little bit of fraying for me. I figure it'll give it a vintage cottage feel. Now, someone might wonder why I didn't do this before I sewed all the panels together, and it's because I wasn't sure what I wanted to do or exactly where I wanted to place them. Had I done it in the beginning, I would have thought I wanted to leave the words on, which I didn't like as much once I had the whole thing together because it covered too much of the background. So I'm glad I did it this way, and you can do it whatever makes you happy. So I'm just gonna whip these out. Now I'm going to sew all the way around the 2 sides, all the way around the outside, and then the inside circle, leaving an opening to turn and press. And it's going to be pretty easy, just straight stitching. So when you get to the inside, where you're sewing the part that's going to go around the trunk of your tree, you're going to sew in short, straight segments, so about 3 inches. You're just going to sew straight until you get to that seam, and then you're going to lift your presser foot and pivot. So you're not really doing a curve, you're doing a lot of little straight lines. So see, I'm just going to turn that and get this edge now lined up at the 1/2 inch on the tape. That's also why it's a lot easier to do tape when you get to this part. Now that we've stitched all the way around the outside, the outer edge, and the inner edge, we have some trimming to do before we turn this right side out, iron it, and do our top stitching. But we are getting close to the end. This corner has a lot of extra fabric. See, we have the 1/2 inch seam allowance, and then all of that has to go right in there. So we have to trim quite a bit off of that. But instead of just cutting it straight off, I recommend coming kind of at an angle, doing 2 clips, and make sure you do not hit your sewing, obviously. So we've gotten all that bulk out, and now when we turn it, it's going to go better. I would also recommend taking a little bit more off,
a little bit more angle down at the end. I'm not going to cut all of this 1/2 inch seam allowance because I want to top stitch, and I feel like that's going to give this flannel extra stability, since I didn't put any interfacing or anything like that, to give it a little extra oomph. So that's how you're going to cut both of the outside corners, the edges that'll be in the back. Now you have a bunch of these. So we need to get the bulk out so that this gets a nice point too, because remember, we want straight edges. We're not doing a curve, so we have to make sure that we trim the bulk off of this so that we can get that look. So I'm going to cut most of, again, being very, very careful not to cut your stitching, but I want to get most of that double out of there. And then again, I'm going to just take some of that off so that there's less competing for space and we won't end up with a big lump. So you're going to do that on all the rest of these. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more of those, and no, 6 more of those, and then 1 more outside corner. I don't think you need to watch me cut that many times. Now, what do we do about these inside? So this is the part that's up at the tree. So these are more inside. So these I'm going to do on the outer corner. Hopefully you can see this. I'm going to do the same thing I did on that really pointy one. I'm going to do it twice just to get a lot of that bulk out of there. And then because we don't need stability up here to keep that crisp edge, I am going to trim all the way through to about 1/4 inch from the 1/2 inch that we sewed. Very carefully. I was cutting like a left-hander. Both my parents are left-handed, so sometimes I get a little confused. But that was feeling a little awkward. So I'm just going to cut all the way around. And now you need to just do a little notching to get this bulk out of these points. Again, don't go too close and cut your stitch line. The goal basically is to relieve the pressure. Kind of like if you try and put too much body into some jeans, you got a little too much pressure. We don't want that kind of pressure in our sewing either. So after thinking about how I wanted to have the back close, there's lots of different ways you can do it. Some people put ribbon, so before they would have sewn this all together, they would have ribbons that would come and they would tie it together. Didn't want to deal with ribbons and didn't want to deal with ribbons when I was storing it. I just want it to be nice, flat, and compact. And because I want mine to be double-sided, where I can have this side out or I can have the snowflakes out, I decided to go back to one of my trusty friends, the Cam Snap, which are plastic snaps, and it's going to look cute because I put the yellow just to show you where I'm planning on putting them so you can see them, but I'm going to use white. So on this side, it's just going to kind of blend with the beards and everything. And then on this side, it's just going to look like another big snowflake. So it'll work out perfectly. So the way that these work, you need, each snap is 4 pieces. So there is the side you're going to see, 2 of those, and then the sides that snap together. So to put 3 snaps, we need 6 of these, and then 3 of each of these. Then you decide where you want to put it, and I got a kit that has a bunch of different colors, and I'll give you a link to that. Found that on Amazon. It has this little press. They give you an awl, I believe that's called. Very sharp, be very careful. So you're basically going to just push it through the fabric. Don't push it through your stitch lines though. Push it through the fabric to make a hole for your snap. Now, because I need these to line up, I'm also going to pick it up and push it through the second layer. So it's going through both sides of this. Then, because this is the top, this is what we want to see on this side, we put that there, and then you can put either of the other side. Doesn't really matter which one you do first. You will just want to make sure you don't do two of the same where you want it to actually snap. And then put it in the tool and you just squeeze down. Don't do it too hard. My husband managed to go too hard and break it. Basically what that does is it bends the plastic, the pointy plastic tip, so that it is inside there. And then we're going to find our hole from the other side, and we're going to come at it from the other angle because we want this button to show on the red side here. So we're going to poke that through. Then we're going to make sure we use the opposite type of clip so that they will actually snap together. Always double check that before you squeeze it, because they're kind of hard to get out and you wouldn't want to ruin this whole project just from putting in a snap. Now, the way this thing works, the button that you're going to see goes in the black part because it's curved like that, and then this presses down to bend the plastic. So again, just going to stick that in there. Like 2 or 3 gentle squeezes, and now we have a snap. And so now I'll just do the other 2. So now that's going to stay closed on that side. And then it's just going to look like 3 buttons or snowflakes when I have the other side up. And I'll show you with pictures with it under tree. But I like this solution. It works great from both sides because I knew I wanted this to be 2-sided tree skirt, and now it is done. Very exciting. In today's tutorial, we are going to make this super cute penguin Christmas tree ornament, and this is a great project to do with kids. You can get my template for free. All you need are some little pieces of felt. You can either sew it together like I've done on this one, or in this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to put it together with glue because that makes it a really easy project to do with kids. I'm going to be using freezer paper. It is a great way to trace and get things cut out nicely on felt, and you can also reuse it. I'll show you how that works. You'll need some nice and sharp scissors for felt. I'm going to be using regular scissors to cut out the templates. We need a pen. If you want to add some embellishments, I added a couple sequins to his little gift. I could have filled that, whatever you want to do. It also includes a back where it looks like the hat goes around the back. You could put a child's initial or anyone's initial. You could put the date. Anything else you wanted to add to the back. Let me show you how easy this is to put together with glue. The first step is to get this free template, and we need to transfer these shapes onto freezer paper. And this is just freezer paper that you buy in the grocery section. It is smooth on one side, like kind of dull on one side, and shiny on the other side. We want to draw on the dull side because when we iron the shiny side onto the felt, it's going to stick. And then you can cut your piece out, but then it peels right off and it leaves no residue at all. It's awesome. And you can use the pieces over and over again. So I'm just going to place this template down over the black felt so that you can kind of see better what I'm doing. And then you'll see I have these organized by color: yellow, green, red, white, and black. So you're just going to trace each of these designs onto this freezer paper so that you can cut them out separately to put on each of the colored pieces of felt. You can also use a light desk. You can do this on a window, but if you put something dark behind your paper, you can see it just fine. One of the cool things about being able to use the freezer paper and iron it on more than once
is that all the pieces that you need to cut 2 of, you only need to trace 1 template because you're going to be able to use it for both cuts. And then you can also use it multiple times if you're going to make more than 1 penguin ornament. It shows you on the template which ones you need to cut 2. You need 2 bodies, the pom-pom if you're going to use felt, the hat piece, and the red hat part. And that's so that everything looks good on the back as well. So now that I have that all traced, I'm just going to take my scissors, and these are just paper scissors, and cut these apart by color. You want to cut pretty close to the shapes just so you don't need as big of a piece of felt when you're ironing this on. Have you ever used freezer paper for quilting or crafting or doing things like this? I'm not sure who came up with this idea, but it is genius. Now I have my iron turned on. We do not need steam, we just need heat. I'm going to place these down on their respective colors of felt and just do a quick pass over and see how that just sticks nicely. It lays flat. So I'm going to do that for each of the colors. And then on the template, when it shows you need to cut 2, we're just going to come back after we've cut our first one and we will iron it back down and cut it again. Then once it's cut out, you're just going to put your finger between the paper and the felt and it peels right off. No residue at all on your felt, like magic. If it starts to lift off, which I actually didn't have happen before, but I guess it can happen, you can either just hold it in place or just hit it with iron one more time. So this little hat rim is a piece that we do need 2 of. So I'm just going to put it right back on there, press it again. And this time I'm just cutting right outside of the paper since I've already cut on that line for the first hat piece. I'm just going to keep all my little template pieces. So if I want to make more, I don't have to use more freezer paper and I don't have to take the time to trace that again. We will need a second body. Having the extra body isn't as necessary when you're gluing it together like we're going to do today. So maybe we will skip that, but I'm going to cut it out. But if you are sewing, like I did on this one, all of the stitching and things are on the back. So you're definitely going to want to hide that with a second piece of felt. But I'm going to cut this out for now, and then we will decide as we go if we need this or not. Honestly, for the eyes, you might just want to cut a teeny piece of felt because cutting around that little template is a little bit crazy. All right, we have all of our pieces. Now it's time to glue him together. Now I have all the pieces laid out in a cute little pom-pom ball we're going to use for the hat and the template. Now the template is going to help us know how to put these pieces together. You can use hot glue. I'm going to be using tacky glue because this is way more kid-friendly and safer, so nobody burns their hands. Some of the pieces will squeeze it right onto the felt, but I'm also going to put a little bit in here, and I'm going to use this craft stylus. I like the ball on the end of it just to get dabs of glue on some of these smaller pieces. You can also use a Q-tip, but because it's so pointed, it's a little harder. So if you have anything like this, go grab it. We're going to start with the black, and then the next piece to go on is the white, and that gets placed right here. And then you can tell on here, the white is going to be above where the feet are. So if you want to place those feet, just to see if you like the placement before you glue anything down, go for it. So that looks good. So I'm going to put some glue on the back of this. You don't need to cover the whole thing, but you just want to do the edges, and you want it to be white. If you go too sparingly, it might not stick quite as well. Another thing I like to have handy is a baby wipe, just because you're going to get glue on your fingers. And a lot of people have these either because they have a baby in the house. Not necessary. You could just have a damp washcloth so you can dab any glue off of your fingers. Now we're going to put the feet down. And the feet do show a little bit from the back, so you only want to put glue at the top of the feet so that you don't end up gluing your penguin to your workspace. Now we are going to figure out where we want the present, the bow, and that impacts where we put the beak and the eyes. Another tool I have that I love are reverse tweezers. So you know, if you ever pluck your eyebrows, tweezers usually just stay open. And then when you squeeze them, they close. These are reverse, hence the name. So you squeeze them to open them and they'll just stay closed. This is great for small pieces because we can put this on the tweezers and then put the glue on there. Then you just turn it over, you place it down where you want it, put your finger down, and then just squeeze to release. These are amazing. So for the eyes, I think I'm going to put the glue right on the penguin and then use the tweezers to get those itty bitty pieces of felt on there, because trying to pick that up, put glue on it, and then put it down, I just don't see that going well. You could add, sequins or beads to the present. I would just, again, grab some tweezers. Next, we're going to glue on the hat. So you'll notice, turn this over, the hat shows a bit from the back, so you're only going to put glue on the top edge of the penguin head. We're going to put the fur trim on there. Now we're going to turn him over, and I do not think we need the other black. We can use him for another penguin, but we are going to put the hat so it's lined up, and then the rim again, just so it looks good from the front and the back, because we all know ornaments never stay the direction you hang them up in, right? And now he is done. Once he dries, you're just going to put a ribbon or a string, grab a needle, however you want to do that, and hook that on there. In today's tutorial, I'm going to show you how to make these really cute cathedral window ornaments. You can use them on your tree. You can give them as little gifts. You can use it as a gift tag. And it is made out of 2 circles of fabric. This is a great way to use your scrap fabric. So the first thing I'm going to use is this circle ruler. I'm using a 6-inch by Lori Holt. If you do not have a circle ruler, you can check the description below for a link to get a template. It's literally just a 6-inch circle, and that will make this ornament of this size, which is about, 2.5 to 2 3/4 inch square. Then the other things you're going to need, I put a little bell on this. I just got this thing of 40 bells at the Dollar Tree, or you could use buttons or any kind of little decorative element. It just adds a little bit extra to that. And then I just got a spool of 1/8 inch wide ribbon to use for the hangers. And you could do anything. You can use gold, you can use ribbon, you can use twine. Just depends on what you want that to look like. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut out circles. So I just took this little scrap strip of fabric. This is one of my designs from Riley Blake, and it came with the white, green, and black background. So I'm going to play with it. So I folded it 3 ways, and then here's a 4th. So I'm going to cut 4 at a time. And you can do this if you're careful, if you have a rotating cutting mat and a really sharp rotary blade. Then you're just going to push down with your hand flat on here and just be really gentle and slow, and make sure you're going all the way around. You want to go around as far as you can while you're still keeping that rotary blade against the circle. At some point, you're going to see it's going to veer off a little bit. So that's when you pick it up and you move your mat and you just keep going. It usually takes me 3 to 4 different cuts with my rotary blade to get all the way around this circle. But I do love this circle ruler that I can just run my blade around and get a nice perfect circle every time. Now that we have some circles cut, you're going to choose 2. So you'll notice on this ornament, the print that shows the most is the holly print. And then I used a solid for the other side. So you could do red. Red would go through there. We'll try that this time. So now I'm going to put these right sides together, and then we're going to stitch all the way around with a 1/4 inch seam and leave just a really, really small section to turn it. The first one I did, I left about that much, and then I found it was really difficult to get it ironed well to keep that curve. So do 1.5 to 2 inches at the most. It'll be a little harder to turn. So go back and forth a little bit on each side, because that's going to be strained a little bit, but then it is going to be a lot easier to press it into a nice circle when we're done. The next thing you need to do is clip the fabric around the outside of the curve, because otherwise when you turn it, you're not going to get a nice circle shape. And there's 2 ways to do that. You can do it the traditional way, and you can take little scissors and just do little snips. You can do triangles, however you want, but this is my favorite way. pinking shears. They're not the least expensive scissors, but I think they're worth the investment if you just want to get things like this done faster. So I'm just going close to the stitching, but make sure you do not hit the stitching. And I'm going to use the pinking shears and go all the way around. And this is going to make this turn really nicely. It's a lot easier on your hands than doing a bunch of little snips on curves like this, and it's fast. However, when I do this, I do not do pinking where it is left open, because then you're not going to have enough room to press that under. So I only do it where the stitching is, and I leave the part that's open the full 1/4 inch. So once you cut it all the way around, then we are going to just really carefully turn that right side out. And as I said, it's a small hole, but it's going to make it a lot easier once you get that turned. So what I do is I try and turn it down and I flip that all the way down. It's going to put less pressure on those seams as you're pulling this fabric through. And then just kind of pinch it together just to help it get in there even better. And then I just take my finger and run it along that seam line to get it as pressed out into a circle as possible. And then we're just going to have this little small section to tuck under and try and curve with the iron before we top stitch that. And then just kind of push it with your fingers just to make sure it's still out, and that gives a nice circle shape. You can see it better on this side. Now that we have this turned right side out, now we need to get this opening pushed under, and we need to get this pressed. So because this is pretty small and this part is pretty small, I'm going to be using my Cricut mini press because I have it and I feel like it's a nice size to use on a project like this. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use my fingers and I'm going to get these turned under and into a curve shape as well as I can. And this is exactly why we wanted the smallest opening possible, because it's honestly not super easy to get an opening like this into a curve. It doesn't have to be absolutely perfect because it's not like we're making a round coaster and you're going to see all of this curve at once, but you want to try and do it as well as possible. Okay, so that's pretty good. Now I'm going to just take this and I'm going to press all the way around, making sure I'm focusing on pressing the outside where all those seams are. Now we're going to go sew this and then we will press it, and then I'll show you how to fold it and stitch it and get this done. This is so quick and easy. Now this is our goal, the cathedral window ornament. We're going to make this from this circle that we have sewn. So the fabric that you have on top will be the main fabric that gets folded over. The fabric on the bottom will become the back and just these little accent peek out colors. So what we're going to do is we're going to fold it in half, and you can finger press it, or you can just give it a little bit of a press. I found giving it a little bit of a press didn't change it, but it made it a little bit easier for the next part when we get to hand sewing. So you're going to open that up and you're going to fold it again, matching the seam that you just pressed. Then we're going to fold it again. It's like we're making pie. Do a little press there. And then we are going to fold it one more time. Give it a little press there. Now we're going to open it up, and you can see where these lines are. You can see it better on this side. You can see where these lines are, and we're going to use those as guides. So I have a needle and I put white thread on it. I just doubled it and knotted it there. And we're going to start by folding the side that you want to be your main fabric. Make sure that stays on the inside. I'm going to put the knot right there on that seam. And then I'm just going to do like probably 2 stitches is fine, to hold that together at that spot. So now it kind of looks like a fortune cookie or a cannoli. Now we're going to take this little fold here, and we are going to stitch that to the center as well. And again, I'm just going to do 2 little stitches. And you probably guessed it, we're now going to bring up that 4th fold. So this is really why we did those folds, so that we can know exactly how to get the quarters, each quarter mark, into the center. So we're not quite to where we want to be, are we? So now we're going to just use our hands and organize these 4 kind of petal shapes so that they're standing up and so that the red is creating a bit of a square. And we're going to press down on that and we're going to iron each of these little sections. And this is another place where this tinier heat press works really well. You don't have to go buy one, obviously, if you don't have one. But if you're a crafter and you have one of these, this is a great project for this to bleed over into your sewing projects. So now we have some nice creases there. And now we're going to take each of these petals, you're going to hold on the red, both sides. You're going to kind of put your thumbs like that to press that down. And then you're just going to flip this triangle to the back. Then you can kind of move that so that puffs out a little bit. See, so easy. And you're going to do that for all 4. Christmas tree ornaments are a great way to use up extra scraps, great for little gifts. They're great gifts for people that are just starting out. Maybe it's their first Christmas tree. You can just whip up a couple, a variety of different fabric ornaments for them that would make a great gift around Halloween or Thanksgiving, depending on when they put up their tree. When do you put up your Christmas tree? I have friends that put it up the day after Halloween. I have other people that always wait until after Thanksgiving. I usually do it the weekend after Thanksgiving myself. For this design, you can hang it from the corner like that, or you can sew it on and have it hang as a square. In today's episode, we are going to make a really easy Christmas tree ornament out of 2 hexagons of fabric. And what's wonderful is you can use this for Christmas, but it also is the Star of David, so you can use it for Hanukkah as well. Many families celebrate both, so they might put some Hanukkah ornaments on their tree, or you could use this as a gift tag for Hanukkah, totally separate from Christmas. So I do love that this works for both the holidays, or you can make them for everyday gift tags, etc. Here is what you're going to need. You need a hexagon template. I'm using the 2 1/4 inch. And then you need 2 pieces of fabric. Usually you'll use 1 dark and 1 light. Rotary cutter. I like to use the rotating mat. It makes it easier to keep this still and cut all the way around it. Thread, scissors, sewing machine, ironing board. And then I do my hangers with embroidery floss. So let's get started. Now, as long as your fabric is large enough, you can cut these both at the same time. Now, if your fabric is pretty close to this size, it's a little harder to line up. Or if you want to fussy cut both sides, then you're going to cut them separately. But I'm not going to be fussy about where the snowflakes are on the back. I'm just going to have some random pieces, so I'm going to do it about there. But I do want to fussy cut where the gnome is going to be in the center. Just like this one has this cute little gnome in the center of the star. This one I'm going to have the guy with the gifts in the center. So I'm going to put this template down, and it's 2 pieces, but I do find it easier to cut with both pieces on there instead of just trying to hold this outer part without the inner part. I'm going to line this up so that the gnome and the gift are in the center, because all of this is not going to show. So we want to make sure that gnome shows in the center. Then I just lift up a little bit and make sure I haven't gone off the edge of my second fabric, because I just want to cut them at the same time. Then I'm just going to take my rotary cutter and I'm going to work around all of the sides. Whoops. Now we're going to put them right sides together. We need to sew around all but the bottom straight edge with a 1/4 inch seam. And hexagons can be a little bit tricky if you're not used to sewing them to know where you need to pivot for that 1/4 inch. So here is a trick. You can take a ruler and a heat erasable pen, put your ruler with the 1/4 inch line right along this line, and then just draw a little line on each end. And then as you're sewing, when your needle gets to that point, you know it is time to lift your presser foot, pivot your fabric, and keep on going. As you start to work with more hexagons, you kind of learn where your presser foot's going to be and get pretty good at guessing where that pivot is. But if you're new to this, this is really, really handy. So we don't need to do these two because we're going to start here. We're going to end here, and these will be parallel with your presser foot. But very handy to have them marked on those spots. Now I'm going to clip the corners, and because we want this to turn and have some nice points here, I'm really going to come down the edge. So instead of just going straight across like this, that leaves a lot of fabric to get into that little spot. I'm going to come at an angle from about halfway down our stitch line. So it really is taking a bit of the bulk out. Just make sure you stay away from your stitch lines and don't cut that. Now we're going to turn this right side out. And I am making this one out of flannel. You can also use cotton. Just totally depends what fabric you want to make your star out of. And these gnomes happen to be on flannel. I'm going to take my little turning tool and very, very gently push towards those corners, kind of rub against that seam, press that flat. Then we're going to turn this open edge under a 1/4 inch and press that flat also. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to head back to the sewing machine and we're going to sew across these 3 straight lines, and you want them to be pretty centered. So you can either eyeball it if you feel confident about that, or you can draw some lines. Again, with the heat erasable pen, we are going to connect the lines. So we're going to sew from here to here. And these are going to serve as the fold lines where you're going to fold that in to create that star. These are so quick and easy to whip up. I changed the top thread to white to match my top fabric, and I'm leaving the bobbin red since most of the back is red. So now we're just going to sew along all of these lines we just drew. And I went over, I think 2, maybe 3 of them twice on the side, just so I could only have 1 knot and just keep sewing. Now I have my mini iron ready to go, and we are going to transform this hexagon into this star ornament. The first thing we're going to do is just get some heat on there to get rid of those lines, the purple heat erasable lines. See, magic, love it. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to fold each of these points in kind of on that stitch line and try and get it to be as pointed as possible at these points, have them come in together. They're not always perfect, but you can get them pretty close. I'm just going to take some clips and clip these down. And then I have changed my top thread back to red because the last thing we need to do is we need to stitch just on top as close to the edges of these points as possible so that they're down like this. For the final step, I just took an 8-inch piece of embroidery floss and I'm going to just poke it through the top, pull the needle off, tie this in a knot, and then trim the excess past the knot to whatever length you want that to be. And it is done. Now we have 2 little gnomes to go on the tree. So here are 4 completed little hexagon star tags. These can be Christmas tree ornaments. You can use them as tags on gifts, just a little extra ornament on a present, maybe on a gift bag. And these were made with my Hanukkah Nights fabric from Riley Blake Designs, and these were made from the Gnome for Christmas flannel. Happy holidays! So are you ready to make some super cute little gnomes for the Christmas tree or just to have as little decorations? I'm going to show you how to do 2 styles, this pom-pom ball style or a shaggier beard style. Both really cute. So let's talk about the supplies that you need. You need noses. Other people have said to use wood balls, but I couldn't find any that didn't have holes in them. So I bought a holiday pick. I think it was from Michael's, and it was like half off. So it cost me like $1 to get 15 different noses. So I just used wire clippers, cut them off, and made a bowl of shiny noses. They don't show up as much as something with a little bit more color, but they kind of shine. I think they'll look really cute on my tree because I'm doing a whole Gnome for Christmas theme this year with my Gnome for Christmas fabric, which is what that hat is made out of. Then optional little pom-pom balls that you might want to put on the top of the hat. A template for the hat, and you can get that on my blog if you're not there already. Look at the link below the video. With this template,
you're going to cut fusible fleece to give the hat some body. I used the Pellon 987F, but you can probably use whatever you have. And then you're also going to use that to cut the fabric. I'll show you how we're going to do that later. You need some fabric. I'm going to do some with the gnomes, which are directional, a little bit more complicated, and then some with the snowflakes, also from my gnome for Christmas. You'll need fabric scissors and some yarn. And I am using this softy chunky yarn, which is 100-gram yarn. You can use thicker, you can use fatter, but I really like how this came out as far as the fluffiness and everything. Optional, if you want to do the pom-pom balls, I found this really cool thing, which is a knitting loom. It makes 4 different sizes, and I'll show you how to do that to make the beard if you want a more circular beard. And then finally, you need a glue gun and some glue sticks. So, ready to get started? I'm going to show you 2 different ways, and both ways you're going to need a strip of yarn. I have these about 12 inches. I would do 12 to 14 inches for tying the pom-pom or the beard together. It's really simple. You just, find the end. Oh boy, I lost the end. Find the end of the yarn from your ball of yarn. Put the end between your thumb and your forefinger, and then depending on how long you want your beard to be, either hold your fingers together or further apart to make a bigger beard. And then I just wrapped this 30 times. You could do more if you want a fluffier beard. Less is going to be a little too sparse, I think. So just like this. All right, now I'm not going to cut the end until I tie it. So I have the beginning end here, so I'm going to pinch the middle, then put this 12-inch piece of yarn through here, and then I'm just going to tie that as tight as I can in a double knot. Okay, so now we have this tied, and we have a bunch of loops. And then you're just going to take your scissors. I usually put where it's tied under my fingers, then kind of spread this out because you want to do it as close to the middle as possible. And then you're going to take scissors and cut through all of those loops. So now we have loops tied together. If you end up with some that are a little bit longer than others, you just give the beard a little trim. So that is how easy it is to make the first kind of beard. Now, if you want to make a gnome that has more of a pom-pom look, or if you also want to make a pom-pom garland for around the house or around the tree, I highly recommend you grab one of these knitting looms. It makes 4 different sizes of yarn pom-pom balls. So it goes like this, and there's 2 halves to it. Doot, doot, doot. So you're going to open them up and take the end of your yarn. You're going to keep these 2 pieces together. Make sure you can see it. And then you're just going to wrap. Now, the more yarn you do, like if you overlap it a little bit, the puffier your pom-pom is going to be. You're just going to wrap it all the way around. I'm going to make this one kind of puffy. You get to the end of the 1/2, and then you're going to put the yarn through this channel. You're going to close it, and you're going to see how that went. So it went through the first channel and in between here, and you're going to open up these, and then you're just going to continue wrapping in the same direction. All right, and then you're going to close that. So you have yarn all the way around the circle. Now this part, I had to read the instructions a couple times because I didn't believe what they were saying, but it's true. The next step is to cut. So you're going to take some smaller scissors and cut. Basically put the scissors against this channel and cut all the way around. on both sides. Make sure you get that piece that went through, because sometimes that doesn't quite. Now, you have fuzz on both sides. Keep it together. Grab one of your long pieces of yarn, and you're going to put that through the channel that we just used as a guide for cutting. See how that is? And now we're going to, oh, it's hard to do, suspend it in the air so you can see. We're going to tie that as tightly as you can, knot it, double knot. And then you can see I didn't quite get that spot cut. Right where it goes through the channel, sometimes you have to go back. Make sure you get that. Okay, so cut, tied. Now I'm going to open this. I'm going to open this side and then just very gently pull the two sides apart. There's a pin on the one side that goes into the hole on the other side. And then you can gently put it back together to make more. And now you have a pom-pom that needs a little bit of trimming. So 2 ways to go about it. If you want to pick something where you are really being very deliberate about what design is on the front of the hat, you can do that. Or you can pick just an overall print, and it's going to be a lot faster and easier to get the fleece onto these pieces and cut them apart. But first, let's look at getting a gnome on there. So this is an extra scrap of fabric that I have from, I don't know, some project I did. So I'm going to hold the hat, and remember the point in this template you can get. The point is the top of the hat. So I'm going to put it over top of this gnome, and then I can cut her feet off and everything's still going to look super cute. So here's my trick. I turn it over and I can see that paper. I've already cut out a bunch of these, the template shapes out of the fusible fleece. So I'm going to put the fusible side down and layer it over top of where the paper pattern is in the bottom. This works if you're using white. If you're using something else, you're going to have to cut out each piece separately. And then I'm just going to quickly press that per the manufacturer's instructions, which might have included no steam, but it worked. So now I have it on there, and then I'm just going to grab some bigger fabric scissors and cut around the fleece. This is a quicker and easier way to get the hats done. Make sure you don't end up with fusible anything on your iron, and then you only really, you don't have to trim anything later because you're going to trim it right now to be the perfect size. All right, so now we have that hat. That's going to be ready to go. Leaving the paper under when you iron does make it curl a little bit, so you might have to flatten that back out. All right, so on this scatter pattern, I'm just going to quickly line up those pieces of fusible fleece. Press them down. So this is great if you want to make quite a few. You can just mass produce, iron a bunch of these on, then you can sit and cut them apart. You can use your rotary cutter and you'll end up with lots of hats, and then you can mass assemble your gnomes. So that is going to be our next step. Now it's time to turn our round and more floppy beard into a gnome. And for that, we need a hot glue gun. Now there's 2 ways to do the tie. This one I used the thread or the pieces of yarn that I tied the beard together with as the holder. So I would simply knot that on the top. And so you're going to have a more unfinished look. If you want a more finished look where you're not seeing the ends, then you're just going to use another piece of yarn or a piece of ribbon. And you're going to knot the 2 ends together. like that. And that knot will end up inside your hat. So I'm going to show you how to do both ways. So we've knotted that one. We're going to use this loop on the ball. So I'm just going to cut the part that tied that pom-pom together, trim that. Now we're ready to go. So we're going to put a red hat on the floppy beard. And so the first thing you're going to do is you're going to decide how high into the hat your beard is going to go and make sure that the string is sticking out, assuming you're going to want to hang it. I'm assuming these are going to be for my Christmas tree. If you don't need anything on the top or to hang it anywhere, then you don't have to worry about that. So that looks good. So I'm going to put a blob of hot glue there, and I'm going to press down the yarn. Try not to glue my fingers too much, but I inevitably do. Okay, now I'm going to lift the beard, and I'm going to put hot glue right down the center where that beard is going to go, and then we're going to just put the beard down and press. Well, that doesn't quite look right, so now we need to form the cone of the hat, and to do that, we're going to run the hot glue down one of the sides, and we're simply going to fold it over and adhere that to the outside of the hat. Now we have the shape we want. Now we're just going to put a little bit more glue around the bottom edge of the hat to hold the yarn, and just kind of put your fingers in the center, like in the center of this. Next, I'm going to add a green pom-pom on the top, which will be a nice accent to the red hat. Glue that on. Then I'm going to pick a nose size. I'm going to give this guy a really big nose. So for these, they have a little bit of a stem that I couldn't get off. So I'm going to put the glue on that so that that's not sticking out, but is going into our pom-pom. So I'm just going to put a bunch of glue on there. Stick that on so that the nose goes over the hat a little bit and also onto the yarn. And look, that's how simple it is. If you wanted to add more pom-poms around, you can. You could put trim around the edge, but it can be as simple as that. Now, if you want the more finished look, let's do a black hat. I haven't done a black one yet. You're going to have your loop with your knot, and you're going to glue that piece of yarn down from the point. Ow. Don't touch the metal part. It's hot. Then you're going to form the hat. Another glue stick. Putting the glue down the one edge, folding it over so it overlaps the outside of the hat to form our cone. A nice little cone. Get the glue off my fingers. Now, before I add the pom-pom beard, I'm just going to put glue all the way around the edge of the hat. And then put that in there and just kind of press around so that the hot glue sticks to some of the yarn, keeps those two pieces together. Test that. Yep, they're together. And always make sure you put the nose the opposite side of the seam. So that's the seam, so we want to put the nose on the front. This guy, I'm going to give him a little bit of a smaller nose. So as you can see, once you get to the gluing part, this goes really fast. So I made a bunch of beards, a bunch of hats, and then just got gluing.
Let's start by talking about supplies. Best case scenario, and how to pinch hit if you need to, which I need to in this case. So we're going to make this cute little pom-pom ball for the back of the hood, little Santa ball, out of a washcloth. So you're going to need one washcloth. You're going to need red and white thread. We're going to need fabric scissors, rotary cutter, rulers. Then I'm going to be using this 9-inch circle ruler by Lori Holt, because then I can just use my rotary cutter to create the circle to make the pom-pom ball. But if you don't have that, you can use a plate. You can use a little smaller, a little bigger, but this is pretty much what you're going to get if you use a 9-inch circle. Now, back to the perfect world and other world scenario. Red bath towel and red hand towel, white hand towel, white washcloth. That's the perfect world. If you can't find a red hand towel, get 2 red bath towels. That's what we're going to need to get this done. It is going to be quick and easy, and it is going to be so incredibly cute. Let's get started. Step 1, we need to cut our towels into the pieces that we need to make this hooded towel. So I'm going to start by cutting the washcloth. If you have a rotary mat, you want to use that. This cute pink one is by Sue Daly from Riley Blake Designs. Then I'm going to be using the circle ruler from Lori Holt. But again, you can use a plate if you don't have this. Place your hand flat down, press that down, and you're just going to cut. When your wrist gets so tweaked that you can't move it and stay along that edge again, you're just going to turn this. I'm going to get that all the way around. See how easy that was? Now we're going to take our white circle and we're going to do our gathering stitches. Now, normally I would do this in white, so it's not going to show, but then you will have no clue what I'm doing. And it's actually kind of hard to see. I'm going to use red so that you can really see what I'm doing. I'm going to go halfway around, and then I'm going to go the other half. Sometimes people will gather, they'll sew all the way around, but I find that to be a little hard to get it to work all the way around, and sometimes my thread breaks, so I like to go halfway. First, we need to pull up the bobbin thread. You want both of your threads nice and long on both sides of your gathering. I'm going to go about a 1/4 inch from the edge, and I'm just going to stitch halfway around. Now, do not cut your thread here. Lift your foot, lift your needle if it is down, and now you need to pull these threads so you have about 10 to 12 inches again. Put those threads on that half. Now we're going to make sure this is nice and long for starting, and we're going to do the other half of the circle. And you want to make sure, again, that you have long strings on both sides of where you want to gather. Now we're going to gather this. Let me show you our goal. This is the one that I've already done. You want it to be a washcloth because you're going to put this through the wash. You want it to dry nicely. I gathered and then I stitched this together just so it makes this big old clump of a Santa ball. So the first thing you need to do is you need to organize these threads. So there's 2 for that half, 2 for that half. Do the same on the other side, just so you know what you're pulling. And if you want to, you could do 2 separate colors so that it's a little bit easier to figure out which threads go with which half. Now you're just going to grab the top thread from one side, doesn't matter which, and you're just going to gently pull, and you're going to gather that washcloth. And I usually pull until it stops, and then I push the washcloth along the string just to move that gathering around. So I kind of do that as far as I can. It's gathering pretty nicely. So now I'm going to take the top thread from the other side just to finish. See, having the multiple threads just makes it go a little bit quicker and easier. So that half is pretty well gathered. I'm going to do the same thing for the other half of the circle. So now we have that pretty gathered. We have all these long threads. So now I want to figure out which ones are from the left and which ones are from the right. Now what I'm going to do is I am going to tie them together. Did a knot, so that brought these sides together. Now we just need to pull this stuff in a little bit more. So what I decided to do was I have some 3-inch long soft sculpture needles that have a really big head to them. And so I can take this long batch of threads, put that through this needle, and then I'm just going to sew just to pull it all into one spot. So you're basically just getting all that gathering mushed together into the center. And it doesn't have to be done neatly because this is all going to be sewn onto the towel. Trim the extra thread, and we're going to set this aside until we have the rest of the hooded towel together. This will be the last thing that we sew on. Next, we are going to take our white towel, and we are going to cut this to 16.5 inches by 5 inches. This is a very linty project because you're going to have a lot of raw edges of towel, but don't worry, we are going to We're going to use zigzagging or get out your serger if you have one to serge some edges. And then always make sure you clean your machine after you do a project like this, because it will probably have more than a usual amount of lint inside. And this is going to be extra. So if you wanted to make little washcloths out of that, or if you were going to make 2 Santa hooded towels, you have enough with 1 hand towel to make 2. Now you're going to zigzag down 2 of the short and 1 of the long sides. We're not going to do all 4 sides because we're going to be cutting a curve off of the top. So we would have cut all that stitching off. Next, we need to cut a piece out of our towel. Now, if you have the hand towel, you're going to use your hand towel, but because I don't, I'm pinch hitting and I'm cutting it out of a big towel. And for this, we need a piece that is 16.5 inches by 9.5 inches. And because we're going to be adding the white around the front edge, we're going to work from all raw edges. So I have that fold lined up on that grid line so that I know I'm going straight. Towels are not the straightest things. So you always want to work from the fold, and then we'll trim accordingly. Nice and thick, which makes it a little bit harder to cut, but we've got this. I'm going to grab my lint roller. This is great for getting threads off your ironing board. And when you have really fluffy things like towels or minky fabric that you're cutting, it helps to get it off of your cutting mat. Now I've changed to a zigzag foot, and I'm going to zigzag down the 2 short ends and across 1 long end of the red hood. Now I'm using a pretty wide zigzag, 4.8, and not a super short, because we're not doing applique on this, we're just securing the edge. So I'm doing a 3 length, and then I want my needle to go over the edge. This is the perfect job for a serger if you have one, but I don't. So I'm going to be doing the zigzag. You can do whatever works for you. And keep pushing that away from your sewing machine as the fuzz comes off, because you want as little as possible to get sucked down in there. Our next step is to make the Santa white border go onto this hood. If you want to just keep it simple, you're going to leave this straight. So then you're just going to fold that under so that the raw edges are under there. You might want to zigzag them first just for extra security, and then you're going to sew straight across. I don't know. I wanted to make my life a little more complicated, so this would be a little bit cuter. So I'm going to make a curved line so it looks like Santa's hat. So this template is available in the pattern that I am selling on Etsy. You don't have to buy it. You can do it the straight way, but if you want this curve and all the written directions, you can go find that there. The link will be in the description below. So I've printed out this template. I'm just going to cut it in half right along that line. Now we have to match these dashed lines where it has the letter A. So I'm going to cut one of them on the line, and then we're going to tape that together, matching that curve. Now I'm going to take the white. These are the zigzag sides. This is the cut side, just raw, ready to roll. Going to line these edges up, and then we're going to pin that and cut that curve. So our next step is to decide how you want to put the white trim onto the hood. So the first thing you're going to do is have it so you can see about half an inch to an inch of the red, so you can see how high this is going to be. And you're going to decide how big you want this part to be on the hood. Do you want it to be really pretty small? Do you want it to be bigger? Totally up to you how you want to do this. So I'm going to do it like that. So I'm going to line those edges up. I'm going to flip it over, and I'm going to fold this down. So we're going to stitch straight across here, but not catch that. I'll show you that part in a minute. I also want to stitch closer to this just to really secure this on here. So I'm going to take my ruler, and I'm going to take a heat erasable pen or draw a line about 1/2 inch from that fold, just so I have a second place to secure this onto the towel. And that line will erase when I iron. Any heat will get rid of that line, so you don't have to worry about that at all. Now we're going to flip that, because we don't want to stitch that part yet. We're going to zigzag that onto the front. This is just securing this to the back. I'm just going to pin this together, and then we're going to sew here and here. Now for these 2 lines of stitching, I'm going to use white thread to match the white and a bobbin thread to match the red, because that will be on the back side. And now I'm sewing down the line that we drew to connect the white closer to the edge of the red. Now the white is secured onto the red. Now I'm going to turn this over. We'll get all that off later too. And I'm going to bring the curve forward. And if you don't do the curve, that's totally fine. You're going to use the same procedure, but this will be straight. And now I'm going to pin this on. Now I'm going to zigzag to secure this together. So I'm doing a 3.2 wide and about a 1.7 long. You will have to help move your fabric along because you're doing 2 layers of towels, and my zigzag doesn't work with a walking foot, so I'm assuming yours might not either. And I'm still using the red bobbin and the white top thread. Now we're going to take our hood and we're going to do it right sides together. So the curved sides together, we're going to fold this in half. And now we're just going to sew down the back, and that is going to make the back of the hood. And we've already zigzagged that edge, so we just need to do a straight stitch with a 1/4 inch seam. Our hood is done. We're going to connect it to the towel, and then we're going to put the pom-pom that we made. Remember, it's been a while. We're going to put that right on there, and this is going to be so adorable. The next step is to sew our hood onto our towel. So this is the seam we just sewed, and then this edge is going to sew right inside the edge of the towel. Let me show you how we're going to set that up. So this is the big bath towel, and I have it folded in half long ways. So this is the center mark of the long side of the towel. It's almost like we're making a cape. Now we're going to match that center mark with this seam that we just sewed for the back of the hood. I'm going to fold this part back just a teeny bit so that I can place the hood right inside, and we're going to overlap it about a 1/2 inch. And now we are going to pin the hood to the towel. We want this edge to be on the inside of the towel, and the outside is just going to look super cute. So the outside is going to have the sewn edge of the bath towel over top of the hood, just like that. And then when you get to the center, you can just fold it over and pin the other side. So as you can see, you can get this hood to lay nice and flat. So it's going to be it's going to be nice and easy to sew, as long as you get it pinned on evenly over the towel. If you have a walking foot, this would be a good time to use it because we do have a bit of bulk to sew over, especially on this white part. Now I'm going to start before the white section so that the thread can get knotted and we can get up to speed, and then we're just sewing across it instead of trying to do any knotting and everything right on that thickness. Make sure you don't sew over your pins because that's a sure way to break a needle. And then either have your stiletto or turning tool or your scissors ready, because even with a walking foot, you might have to help this along a little bit. So now we're going to sew right along this edge all the way down and just past the other end of the white. Once you get off that white, it gets a lot easier. And I am using red thread for both the top and the bobbin because we're going over red and we don't want any of the stitching to show. It will show a little bit on the white, but overall it's red to red. Now I'm going to turn it over because you'll see we have all of this towel that's not attached to the hood. So I'm going to sew right along the edging of the towel. So we're going to have double stitching to keep this hood nice and secure. And even with the walking foot, I had to pull a little bit to get it to go because it was just going up such a big lump of towel. That's a technical term. And as you go, just keep adjusting the towel and the hood so that this part you're about to sew on stays flat. Oh, we're almost done. The hood is on the towel. I love the curve. Straight will be really cute too, but I love the curve. Now we need to take our little washcloth pom-pom ball and attach it to the point of the hood. I have taken this long needle again, and I have doubled the thread and tied it in a knot. And because this is a washcloth, it's going to wash and dry great in the laundry. You're just going to have to poof it out a little bit when it's on your child's head. And you're going to need to make sure that you get it sewn on pretty securely so it's not going to come off in the wash. And I'm using white this time so that no matter where the stitching is on this little ball, it is not going to show. So my goal here, I do have a goal. My goal here is to just kind of keep going around and kind of sewing a little circle around the base of the washcloth, attaching it to the hood each stitch. I think every baby celebrating Christmas needs one of these. Okay, so I'm back past where I started. So I'm just going to put a couple really short, tight stitches and then knot this. That's it. It's done. In today's tutorial, we are going to make a simple dog bandana that will go right over your dog's collar. and it's going to have the little points and you can put bells on it. It's going to be super cute. So here is what you're going to need. This one is going to be a larger bandana, the one that I'm going to show you. It will be 12 inches wide and about 8 inches from the collar to the point when it is completed for a bigger dog. And then I will also have sizing and ways to make the same concept for smaller dogs as well, but I'm going to show you the bigger dog one first. The first thing you're going to need is a fabric that's going to go over your collar. So the green piece in the center, we're going to cut to 5 inches by 13 inches. We need it a little bit wider than the bandana triangle section because we're going to fold those edges over and sew them and want this green to be 12 inches when all is said and done. This is going to make the points. You're going to need 10 pieces of this because we're going to have 5 points, and this is 4 inches by 5 inches. Then you need 2 pieces for the bandana section. So you need 2 that measures 12 inches by 7 inches. So we can put this one aside for now. We need to do a little bit of cutting on these pieces. So first we're going to take the bandana part and I'm going to line this up on the mat. So the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to take a heat erasable pen and I'm going to make a little mark 1/4 inch from the top. That's going to be our seam allowance when we sew it to this green piece. Then we're going to find the center. This is 12 inches wide, so it's going to be 6 in from each side. Put a little point there. And then I'm going to cut in between those lines. So now I'm just lining my ruler up between that point, and I'm going to cut off both of these outside triangles to give me the bandana shape for this over the collar dog bandana. And now we are going to prepare our points. So I'm going to cut these in sets of 2 and just keep them together. And this is 4 inches wide, 5 inches tall. So you're just going to cut from the top corner down to that 2-inch point so that we're making long, skinny triangles. And then I'm going to set them aside and keep them in their pairs of 2 because they're matched up perfectly to go and stitch together. It can be a little tricky to guesstimate where you need to turn to get to the 1/4 inch on this side. So what you can do is take a ruler and a heat erasable pen, put it on the 1/4 inch along that second edge, and then just draw a little line about where it's going to meet. And then you're going to know where you need to pivot when you get to that point. So I'm going to do that on each set. And then I'm also going to just put a pin down the center just to help everything stay in place as we move and sew these. Now I'm going to sew down both of these edges with a 1/4 inch seam. And you're going to sew until your needle hits that line that we drew, and then you're going to have the perfect point to pivot to do the 1/4 inch up the other side. Before we turn the triangles right side out, we're going to need to do some serious trimming because you can see there's very, very little space in there for all of this fabric. So you definitely need that top edge cut off, but then you also need to come down on the sides pretty close to that stitching at the end without cutting the stitching. We need to do that for all 5. Now we are just going to turn these right side out. And then I'm going to use this little turning tool very gently. You don't want it to push through your stitching. And you're going to get that point out as well as you can. Next, we're going to iron the short ends of the green, which is going to go over the collar, in twice to encapsulate that raw edge. Now this is 13 inches wide. You'll notice it is shorter than this. So once we get it folded, we want the folded edge of the green to match this red for the bandana section. So you just want to fold a 1/4 inch and then a 1/4 inch on each side. Now I did take and trim off the dog ears on all of these so that our triangles are straight across the top. Then I lined up the bandana along a grid line so that we can place these properly. And I'm going to start 3/4 of an inch from the edge. So make sure you leave some room there because this is going to be stitched a 1/4 inch and then that needs to be stitched too. So we need to make sure these are not going to get caught in those seams. And what I like to do is I like to work from the outside in for how I have these triangles overlapped. So the second one, I like to put 1.5 inches from this point to this point and do that on both sides. And then your last one gets centered. So now you're either going to pin or clip these. I'm just going to make sure I get a clip at each of these triangles points so that they're not going to shift or pivot. Okay, so I'm going to take this to the machine. We're going to baste that on, and then we're going to come back and we're going to attach both of these triangles to the green. Now that we have the triangles basted onto this side, we're now going to be sewing the two sides of the bandana together. I'm going to start with this, with the plain one, the one that doesn't have the points first. So that's just going to be the easiest to do. And as you'll notice, my tips go off a little bit on the ends. That's okay. I'm going to sew it, and then I'm going to press it like this, and then I will trim that part. So if you're slightly off, no worries, scissors will fix it. So I'm just going to clip these together, and you want this to be right sides together. And remember, even though the green is green on both sides, since we did fold this over, this part is the back, and the part that doesn't show the fold is going to be on the outside. So you're going to pin that. I'm going to sew that together with a 1/4 inch seam. You can see there's just that teeny bit off the edge. You can see it better from this side. So I'm just going to trim that. Now we're going to put this right side up, and we're going to put this one right side down on the opposite side. We're just going to make sure that's centered. So if it's a little bit over the edge, it's a little bit over the edge evenly, and that this point is on the same line as this point. I'm going to clip this together, and we're going to sew this on just the same way we did this one with the 1/4 inch seam. Now we have both sides of the bandana sewn onto the center green. That's going to fold in half. That's where your dog collar goes through. The next step is going to be to match the red raw edges and sew around with a 1/4 inch seam. But you might see a problem. We have some of these triangles sticking out, so we need to deal with that first. I'm going to fold the two triangles on each side up a little bit and pin them so that there's plenty of clearance. So I would get it at least 1/2 inch so that it's not going to interfere with your sewing. Now we're going to fold this down, and we are going to match the raw edges of the red. And because we have a little bit of bulk with those triangles in the center, I'm going to use pins instead of clips just to make sure everything stays exactly where I want to. Now, if you liked having that line when we were sewing those triangles, you can do it again here. Just line this up with 1/4 inch onto that edge, draw a line, and you'll know when your needle gets there, that's the time to pivot. And I definitely use more pins. I would probably only do 3. I use a few more just because there's a little bit of bulk in here, and I want to make sure I get all of these edges matched up. Now we're going to go back to the sewing machine, and we're going to sew 1/4 inch here and here, nothing up here. Now we're going to turn it right side out. Put your fingers in there and grab the pins before you start turning it right side out, so you do not stab yourself. Okay, so we had 2 pins. 2 pins are out. Now I can turn this right side out worry-free. So if you wanted to personalize this, you could embroider their name on the top. Now we just need to get this red part, let's see it better this way. We need to get this pressed out. So I'm going to just use my fingers, make sure we have those seams stretched all the way out. Now that we have it turned and pressed, the final step is to sew about 1/8 of an inch from this stitch line. That will sew the seam in there, and it'll make it so your channel is straight and your collar won't end up way down in the bottom, and it gives it a little bit more of a finished look. And now I'm just going to go and hand stitch on some bells. You could also do little pom-poms. You could buy these separate, or you could cut them off of here and put that on there. That would also be super cute. And these bells are just from the Dollar Tree. I got 40 little bells for $1.25. So I can do lots of projects because I only need 5 for this one. So in today's video, we are going to make a dog Christmas stocking. I made this little size yesterday just to test how I wanted to put it together. And I think it is such a cute size to be like a gift for your favorite dogs in your life that you can get this template for free. There'll be a link in the video below. And then we are going to make a full-size one with this same fabric. So this is a really cute dog print that I got at Hobby Lobby. I absolutely love the contrast of it. Just like with this one, I'm going to put red on the inside. You could use a Christmas print if you want to, but I'm just keeping it kind of modern and bold. I picked up this collar at the Dollar Tree, and I'm going to use this as the hook on the full-size stocking. I just think that'll really add some fun and whimsy to it. And then I plan on adding these jingle bells that I also picked up at Hobby Lobby when I was there grabbing this fabric, just to give it a real Christmas feel. So I have 2 pieces of fabric, and I'm going to show you why I cut them this way in a moment. Now, if you're doing a directional fabric like this, you do need to pay attention to how you lay out the pattern and also how you sew it together. And I'm going to fold it in half. And then you're going to either make a pattern, or you can get the full-size stocking pattern in my Etsy shop along with printer-friendly directions for how to put this together. So you're going to cut these apart and tape them together on these dashed lines, and we're going to place that on the fold. Now, because this is a dog bone and it is symmetrical, if you prefer not to cut on a fold, you can always print this twice and make a full-size pattern. But I figure, why cut around this shape twice when we can place it on a fold and cut it once? So I'm going to pin this on here and cut that out. We're going to need 4 of these shapes, 2 for the outside and 2 for the lining. Now, the outside, if you wanted to, you could do the dogs on the front or whatever you want on the front and do a plain back to your stocking. I'm going to use this same print on the front and the back, and then I'm going to use red for the lining. And I'm just going to take my fabric scissors and I'm going to cut all the way around. Now, there's a few options. Because you need 2 of these, you could cut them at the same time. But I feel like with curves like this, sometimes they don't end up matching really well when you're cutting 2 folded things at the same time. So I'm going to show you a little trick that I came up with from making a bunch of baby bibs recently. This has nothing to do with baby bibs, but I'm going to use what I call my baby bib technique. So we have 1 bone cut out, and you need to make sure that when you sew this together that you remember to leave the top open and not the bottom. I might have done the bottom open on that small one the first time I did it, but you want to make sure it is the top that is left open. So I'm going to turn this over, and on the pattern, there are some little lines to show you where to mark. So I'm just going to mark these little lines right here on the back of my fabric. We are going to stitch all the way around and leave the top completely open. But instead of cutting another shape just like this, I am just going to pin this onto this piece of fabric, because we are going to have to trim all around this with pinking shears or cutting curves later anyway. So I find this to be a more efficient way of working. And then we're going to sew all the way around between these 2 points with a 1/4 inch seam from the edge of the cut fabric. And because there are so many curves and we want it to have a nice curve when we turn and press it, I'm going to use a pretty small stitch. I usually use a 1.8 to a 2.0, because the smaller your stitch, the better curve you're going to have when you turn and press the fabric. So if you're doing straight lines, you can get away with much larger stitches, but when you're doing curves, the smaller the stitch, the better your curve. Now I'm going to cut out 1 red piece, and I'm going to pin together the same way for the lining. So I'm stitching right along the edge of the cut red bone onto the rectangle. It's a little bit hard to see, but it really does save us a little bit of time since we're going to have to cut all those curves later. And on the area where I'm going to be turning the whole thing right side out, I'm going to go back and forth and not just knot, because there'll be a little bit more strain at that area, and I like to reinforce it. Now we have the bone shape sewn onto the rectangle for both the outside and the lining pieces. I'm a fan of pinking shears. They are, they're not the easiest to squeeze always, but The action of the squeezing like this, these fiskers, is a lot easier on your thumb. It uses the tendon very differently, and you can get these curves clipped a lot faster. And this is why I like to sew a shape onto an uncut piece of fabric instead of cutting the shape twice and then having to do this anyway. It just saves me a step. I'm just going to trim close to the curves without cutting any of the stitching. Using a combination of the pinking shears on the curves and straight scissors on the straight sections and on the unsewn curves at the top of the stocking to just get this done and ready as quickly and efficiently as possible. I'm going to set that aside, and now we're going to do the red. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to use the straight scissors on the straightaways and the unsewn curved edge and the pinking shears on the sewn curved. Now we are going to turn our outside right side out. Now I am using a duck cloth, which gives this stocking a little bit of shape and stability. If you're using 2 cottons or thinner cottons, you might want to add some fusible fleece to the outside. So you could just iron that on the lining or the outside fabric before you start all of your cutting and sewing. But if I'm using flannel or a duck cloth, I usually just use the fabrics and don't add any extra padding. So this is still inside out. This one is right side out. Now we are going to put the exterior inside the lining. You don't have to worry about really getting it matched up well down in here. We need to match these top edges. So we're going to start by matching these seams. You can use pins, but I like to use clips on this section. We're just going to get these edges lined up. But before we pin all the way around, you don't want to forget about the hanger section. So on the sample that I did, the small one, I just used ribbon and I put it right in that seam. See there? So I put that in, here. So I put it coming down here, just clipped it right in there. But I'm not sure I love where it is. It hangs okay, but I don't love it. For the bigger one, I want it up here. So I want it kind of at the top of the curve on one side. And I want to make it more interesting because I want to really bring the dog accent in here. So I want to use the collar. We're going to open this up. So we're going to put half in here and half in here, but we need to decide how long we want it to be. I am really just going to eyeball it. And I'm not going to give you measurements because every collar might be a little bit different. Just looking at where the pieces are, where this thing is, where that is, where this hook is going to be, because you'll hang it like that. And then I'm just going to cut about 1/4 to 1/2 inch down from there. Just close your eyes and do it. It was only $1.25. Got that at the Dollar Tree. So this side is a single piece, and this side is a double piece. I'm going to take a lighter. I'm going to quickly melt these raw ends so that they're not going to fray. By burning or melting the edges, you can reduce your bulk because you don't have to fold this over. You can just fold it in half and sew it together. Make sure if there is a design on your webbing, like the one that I got, make sure that is going to be on the outside when the clip looks like this. So then when it clicks together, it's going to be like that. You don't want this sewn raw edge on the outside. So just double check that. And then this was how it was going to be. So this one's a lot shorter than this one because we're planning on this kind of staying straight when the stocking is hanging. So we're going to put this at the top curve on one side. So what you're going to do is you're going to take this and put it in between these layers so that you're seeing the back. This is really important because we need to make sure we line both of these up in the same direction so it doesn't look twisted once this is sewn and turned. I mean, if it does, we can always use our seam ripper and fix it. It'll be okay. But the goal is to not have that happen. So then you're going to turn this over and you're going to have this one upside down. You're going to put it in here and you're going to line it up So it's at the same place. See right there? It's at the same place on the curve as the last one. Now, because I'm kind of paranoid, let's just kind of sneak that out and make sure that it's going to be right. That'll flip up like that, and that'll clip like that. Okay, I think we've got it right. So now I'm just going to clip the rest of the way around, and then we are going to sew all the way around the top with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Again, using a small stitch length, like a 1.8 to a 2.0, because this is a lot of curve in this area. We are almost done. We're going to be turning it right side out. And if you want to turn it right side out and just test that hook before you use the pinking shears on that side, it's probably not a bad idea. So let's do that. Worked perfectly. Okay. Now I'm going to put that back in there. The reason you want to test before you do the pinking shears is that if you need to flip it, like if it got twisted and you needed to flip one, you would want to pull the seam out and restitch it while there's still more fabric and it's not pinked, like the pinking shear triangles aren't in there. So now we're going to grab these one last time, and you're going to carefully clip the curves. I'm not clipping the dog collar because honestly, I'm not sure that I can. And I know for sure it's not going to feel good on my wrist to do that. So I'm just going to skip that spot. So I would love to know who you are going to make a dog stocking for. You're going to make it for your own fur babies, or you're going to make it for your grand dogs. You're going to make them to sew and sell. And then what would you put in them? Are you going to get them some toys, some treats? Let me know in the comments what you would put in a dog stocking for Christmas. So we have that all trimmed. Now we're going to turn this right side out through the lining. It's going to look a little bit weird at first. Before we put the lining into the outside, we need to close this hole. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to iron all the way around. So I'm going to get this nice and pushed out. I'm going to iron that. I'm going to iron that. Then I'm going to pin this together. And I'm just going to use my machine and sew really close to the edge. If you wanted this to be a reversible stocking, you could hand stitch that so that no one would see it. But this isn't going to be reversible because this is definitely the better side. So I'm just going to put red thread in my machine and sew straight down there. I pressed the two ends and I sewed the turning spot closed. You can barely see it because I used the red thread that matched. Now we are just going to push the lining inside the exterior, and then we're going to get the bone sections. Can't really show you because I'm doing it inside, but we're just going to get that smoothed out on the inside. Then you're just going to pull this part to create the bone shape on the top, basically getting to the seams where the white and the red are sewn together. Then I'm going to take it back to the ironing board, and I'm just going to press that edge nice and flat. Then if you want to top stitch, you can. You could use a color. You could use white on the outside, red on the inside so that it doesn't really show. Or you can just leave it ironed. So for my little mini one, I just left it. I decided not to top stitch, but because this one is so big, I think I am going to top stitch it just to keep that part together properly. Using this for the hanging made it really easy to top stitch around it because it stayed in two pieces. So now you're just going to clip it together, and it's a long hook, but I love it. It is super cute. We could have maybe made it a little bit shorter here, but you know, shoulda, coulda, woulda next time. If you want it to be shorter, make it shorter. But I'm glad I kept this on because these jingle bells came with a string. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut that knot off. I'm going to tie it right onto that D-ring and just trim that. And so now it's just a really fun and kind of modern dog stocking ready for the holidays.